Well, hi everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Feeling Smarter. As always, I'm joined by Tim Miller. G'day, Tim. How are you?
Yeah, going pretty well today, Aaron. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Well, we're staying on the theme of SMSF tax planning because, of course, on the 8th of May coming up, we have our SMSF tax planning webinar, a 1.5 hour webinar where we take a look at all the tips, traps, strategies around what you need to look with your SMSF clients before the 30th of June. So last week, Tim, we spoke a little bit about some strategy areas. Today, we want to talk a little bit more about documents and some of the areas that you need to be contemplating alongside those strategy considerations and so forth. So to you, what do you see as some of those critical documents that we need to be aware of and potentially updating and considering in the lead up to the end of the financial year?
Yeah, look, I guess there's always the obvious ones, Aaron, like things such as the investment strategy, which is ultimately for most funds, I would hope is a moving beast anyhow, and so
Yep.
it requires regular review, and so this is clearly the optimal time, particularly as we're approaching 30 June, but also beyond 30 June as to what sort of investments the super fund wants to hold, but also are those investments meeting the fund's objectives. So the investment strategy is always clearly number one in that list. But then you start to look at a few other things from an investment point of view. You start to look at other documentation, like do you need to review, particularly if you've got a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, have you reviewed the terms of your loan to ensure that the fund is meeting it? Do you need to review the interest rates, for example? And similarly with your collectibles and personal use assets, are you storing those assets and are your storage records up to date? So they're the sorts of things I'd be looking at primarily from an investment point of view.
Yep. And then, so I was just going to say then, so I guess from a contribution point of view as well, there are not only strategies here, but there are documents that we might need to implement if we're going to affect those strategies as well.
Well, that's right. So you've got again your obvious ones like your notice of intention to claim a tax deduction, but then you've also got your other documentation. Say if you're going to make contributions in June that you're going to utilise or allocate to a contribution reserve, then you want to make sure that you've prepared those documents when those contributions are actually received. So so not only do you have your legislated requirements like your notice of intention, but you've then also got your audit documents in order for things such as allocating a contribution to the following year for CAT purposes.
Yeah, and the other area, and you touched on it at the very beginning around the investment strategy and the need to review, one of those requirements that the ATO make very clear in respect to reviews is around, say, the commencement of a pension. So documentation in respect to the commencement of the pension is not only looking at things like market valuations and getting those valuations done, maybe not only in the context of 30 June coming, but also in respect to the commencement of that pension. And off the back of that, the investment strategy review, because of the fact that we're starting an income stream and therefore items such as cash flow and the ability to discharge liabilities as and when they fall due also become crucially important.
Well, they do, and the other thing too is, particularly for those that are commencing pensions. So not only have you got your standard pension commencement kit, for want of a better term, so your pension contract, but then you've got to look at, okay, well, are we eligible in year one, for example, to utilise disregarded small fund assets and segregation and those sorts of issues. So do we need to be reviewing the investments from that point? And if so, if we're looking to commence a pension now or effectively on 1 July, for example, which is obviously day one of the new financial year, have you got everything in order if you're wanting to apply segregation, whether you can or can't, obviously.
Yeah. And I guess the final area is not necessarily specific to 30 June, but as we work through this period, it provides us with a good opportunity to look at a number of key and critical documents that relate to the SMSF. And I guess investment strategies, we have that ongoing requirement to regularly review, but when we look at maybe the deed ordinarily, subject to legislative change, we might think of binding death benefit nominations or enduring powers of attorney. There are a range of other areas that we need to be quite regularly updating, understanding, or at least referencing at this particular time of year?
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, the two of us spoke at the beginning of the year in our State of Play webinar, where we talked about the number of death benefit cases that we would expect to see through 2024. And of course, that's come true. We've seen a number already. And it's important it's important to highlight how important documentation is there. And so, that is, to me, an area that needs reviewing probably more regularly not more regularly than the investment strategy, but, particularly if circumstances are changing, you want to make sure that your documents are fit for purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tim, these are just some of the areas that we're going to be talking about as part of our SMSF tax planning webinar. And one of the key things that you're working on at the moment is, of course, the tax planning checklist that comes with this particular webinar, whether people attend live or they want to actually just buy the recording.
Correct. Yes, and still working my way through it. It is a significant document, as we've highlighted before, 30 odd pages of resource references within it. So we find it to be an exceptionally good resource, but a fairly decent one to put the preparation time into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, our webinar is scheduled for the 8th of May. So if you haven't registered already, take the opportunity to visit the smartersmsf.com/events page. For our members, of course, it is included within your CPD subscription. Otherwise, thanks, Tim, once again for the chat, and we'll chat next week.
No worries, Aaron. We'll see you next week.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone, and bye for now.
Bye.